arrived in Equatorial Guinea in February 2024 sunburned and anxious, stepping off the plane with my German efficiency, my fair skin clashing with the red earth and humid embrace of Malabo. I was there on assignment with a non-profit environmental organization focused on marine and forest preservation, a project funded partly by European Union grants and supported by the local government. I was assigned to oversee logistics and community engagement, bridging local knowledge with international conservation efforts. I never expected to find myself entangled not just in local politics, but in an affair with Baltasar Ngonga, a man whose presence carried the weight of old power and the scent of calculated charm. He wasn't just a government official, he was the head of the National Financial Investigation Agency and unknown to many, deeply embedded in the inner circles of Equatorial Guinea's power structures. Charismatic, intelligent, and married to a woman with royal ties, Baltasar had a reputation for discretion and diplomacy. I had a reputation for focus and fire. We first met during a high-profile NGO roundtable hosted at a seaside hotel in Bata, a humid afternoon filled with polite conversation and political overtones. He wore a navy blue suit, no tie, a small gold pin on his lapel shaped like the national coat of arms. I wore a linen dress and a tight smile. When we were introduced, his eyes lingered. "Germany," he said, "always precise. But you," he paused, "you seem less typical." I laughed. "You seem more curious than your position allows, Mr. Ngonga." And with that, it began. Our interactions were always professional, at least in public. But I felt it immediately, the magnetic push-pull of forbidden interest. Baltasar would linger after meetings, asking me about Berlin, about the Bauhaus architecture of my hometown. He was surprisingly knowledgeable about German literature, once quoting Rilke to me on a government balcony, overlooking the Rio Muni. "We are not meant to live in hiding," he said one evening. I remember laughing nervously. "Is that confession?" "No," he replied, stepping closer. "It's an invitation." Our first real encounter, the moment the professional dissolved into personal, came in late March. We were both at a gala for international donors. He danced with his wife while I stood with my colleagues, sipping dry wine and pretending not to watch him. Later, I wandered onto the balcony for air. He followed. "You don't belong here," he said. I bristled. "Excuse me, I mean, this world. The false smiles, the dirty hands. You seem clean." I turned to face him. "Then don't touch me." He smiled. And then he did. April 2024, the secret garden. We became careful. Too careful. Burner phones. Anonymous messages. We met at a remote ecotourist lodge in Bioko Island, a place he claimed was under review for state investment. It became our haven. The staff didn't ask questions, they were paid not to. Baltasar's duality fascinated me. He could be terrifying at his desk, reviewing corruption cases with the cold eye of a prosecutor, and then at night, he would lie next to me, tracing the freckles on my shoulders and whispering about escaping to Morocco, or Lisbon, or anywhere we didn't have titles. He told me once, as we lay in bed while the ceiling fan turned lazily above, "I have never loved someone I couldn't own. Until now I didn't know whether to feel flattered or afraid." His marriage was ceremonial, political. He said that often, and I pretended to believe it. But every time his phone buzzed, and he turned it face down, I was reminded of what we were, a secret. A whispered indulgence between power and privilege. May 2024, shadows in the capital. By May, things had changed. He grew more possessive. He didn't like when I traveled without informing him. When I spoke to a young Cameroonian marine biologist at a UN event, Baltasar later asked coldly, "Is he your type?" I pushed back. "You don't get to be jealous. You're married." He stared at me for a long time. "And you're naive if you think this can last." He was right. We both knew it. But we were addicts to our own danger. That month, I learned that Baltasar was under investigation himself. Quiet whispers in EU channels about financial inconsistencies in oil oversight accounts. I asked him directly. "They want to bury me," he said. "And you being with me doesn't help. Then why do you keep pulling me closer?" "Because you make me feel like I'm not already buried." June 2024, the cracks begin. I started pulling away. Not out of morality, no. I'd long crossed that line, but out of fear. We were being watched. I noticed one of his aides at the airport, even when I was traveling inland. I found my hotel room searched once. My laptop moved slightly. It wasn't paranoia. It was politics. One night, after an argument where I told him I was planning to return to Germany early, he showed up at my temporary residence unannounced. His driver stayed in the car. He looked tired, worn, vulnerable in a way that was almost cruel to witness. "I will leave her," he said. "Come with me to São Tomé next week." 1 week. "Then you can go," but I couldn't. I had already made up my mind. We ended things on July 7th, beneath the massive sabre tree in the botanical gardens outside Malabo. It was symbolic, I think. The sabre is sacred in local tradition, a bridge between worlds, between the living and the spirit. "I'll never forgive you for walking away," he said, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "And I'll never forgive myself if I stay," I replied. We didn't kiss goodbye. We didn't cry. We sat on a stone bench, listening to the wind move through the tree, and then I left back in Germany. I sometimes check the news for Baltasar's name. Nothing ever surfaces. His affairs, both financial and emotional, are buried like the rest. I returned to my work, back to my ordered life. But sometimes, in the grey Berlin rain, I think of his hands, his voice. The danger we danced in for 5 stolen months. Because secrets only stay powerful when they're shared with someone who knows how to keep them. The first kiss, March 28, 2024. It was the week the rains finally came, washing the red dust from the streets of Bata and drawing mosquitoes from every shaded puddle. I remember the hotel lobby smelling of overripe mangoes and cigars, the kind diplomats lit without lighting the mood. I was tired of the donors, the layers of bureaucracy, the placating smiles. And yet I stayed at the reception long after my colleagues left. I think I knew he would come. He did. Baltasar walked in with the same deliberate gait he always had, like every step was measured against risk. He nodded to a minister, smiled at an oil executive, and then without hesitation walked straight toward me. "Dance with me," he said. I blinked. "Is that wise?" He offered a small, almost mocking smile. "You think wisdom has kept this country afloat?" He pulled me onto the marble floor. The band was playing some bastardized jazz standard with a West African lilt. His hand settled at the small of my back, not too low, not too suggestive. But I felt it. The tremor beneath the calm. "This is dangerous," I whispered. He leaned in. "I know." And that was it. The music, the politics, the tropical sweat on my spine. It all blurred into a single pull. When the song ended, we didn't move. People clapped around us, but we were frozen, locked in something unspeakable. He said, "Follow me," and I did. We slipped out through the service corridor, into the staff staircase, and climbed 2 flights in silence. He had booked a private meeting suite ostensibly for a last-minute call with officials in Malabo. He opened the door for me and closed it behind us with a soft click. No words. Just the slow exhale of proximity collapsing in on itself. He stepped forward. I didn't move. His hand brushed my jaw, rougher than I expected, calloused from a man who didn't lift papers so much as burdens. And then he kissed me. It wasn't soft. It wasn't gentle. It was the kind of kiss you give when you've waited too long, when you've told yourself no too many times. It tasted like control breaking, like secrets breaking surface after too long underwater. When we finally pulled apart, I didn't say anything, neither did he. We simply stood there, the gravity between us irreversible, and in that moment, I knew, this would end badly. To say I fell for Baltasar would be too passive. I didn't fall. I was drawn, carved, seduced with the kind of patience only power knows how to practice. He didn't conquer me the way most men try, with speed or vanity or promises. Baltasar played a longer game. He didn't chase me. He watched me. Baltasar understood silence like a language. He rarely filled space unnecessarily. While others tried to impress with monologues or inflated resumes, he asked one question at a time. And then he waited. His silences weren't empty, they were pressure points. He gave me room to speak, but not room to run. At first, I mistook it for disinterest. Then I realized it was strategy. In meetings, he'd sometimes catch my eye and hold it for just a beat too long. It wasn't flirtation, it was interrogation dressed as curiosity. I began to notice when he didn't speak, when he didn't smile, when he nodded instead of answering. It made everything he finally said matter more. I'd find myself watching him when I shouldn't. Wondering what he was thinking. Wondering if I was being studied because I was Baltasar mirrored me not as mimicry, but as empathy made surgical. He learned my rhythms. If I was sarcastic, he matched it dryly. When I was passionate, he let me burn without trying to control the fire. He was rarely surprised by my reactions. It was as if he'd already imagined them. He made me feel understood without ever making it obvious. In a country where everything felt unfamiliar, climate, language, customs, Baltasar became a strange kind of anchor. The way he listened, the references he dropped, Nietzsche, Sontag, even Hannah Arendt, the deliberate pauses he took before saying my name, it was like he'd tailored himself to fit inside my mind, and I let him. It was a late April night when I realized how far he'd gotten under my skin. We were lying on the hammock of that eco-lodge, under mosquito nets and stars, and he told me something about his childhood. Not everything. Just enough. He said, "My father used to tell me that power is a cage disguised as a mansion." I asked him, "Is that why you wear it like armor?" He turned to me and said, "No. That's why I wear it like perfume. So no one smells the fear underneath." He didn't smile after that. He just looked up at the sky, and I watched the tightness in his jaw, the flicker of boyhood that hadn't been destroyed, only buried. I felt something dangerous happen inside me in that moment, and once a woman wants to protect a man who doesn't need protection, he owns her without touching her. He didn't touch me for weeks. And when he finally did, it was deliberate. It wasn't the usual test the waters kind of touch. It was full ownership. He kissed me the way men claim land. After that night, our bodies became co-conspirators. And still, he never rushed. He drew it out, pausing mid-embrace to look me in the eyes, pulling my wrists above my head and holding them not with force, but with certainty. He didn't ask. He didn't seduce. He orchestrated. He didn't make love like a man. He made love like a threat disguised as pleasure. The first time, he whispered into my ear, "If I can't own your days, let me own your nights," and I let him. For 4 months, I belonged to him in ways I still don't fully understand. But why did I stay? Because ownership with Baltasar wasn't brutal. It was elegant. He wrote me handwritten letters, slid into the folds of NGO folders. He sent flowers under aliases. He once sent me a necklace made of sea glass, with a note, "Even the ocean returns what it breaks." He cooked for me once fresh plantains, grilled barracuda, and a glass of red wine flown in from Lisbon. He never asked me to change. He simply created a world where being with him felt inevitable. He was chaos wrapped in control. He was danger that smelled like diplomacy. He was married, unavailable, unwise, and yet the most alive thing I'd touched in years. But ownership comes with cost. By June, I wasn't sleeping well. I was scanning rooms before entering. His name became a ghost in my phone, and yet I still waited for every message. He began calling at 3 a.m., drunk or desperate, or both. "Do you miss me? Do you think of me when you're with them? Would you leave everything if I asked you now?" And I'd answer him with honesty. I didn't. Oh yes, always. I already did. And yet, love or not, obsession or not, I knew the difference between passion and imprisonment. So I planned my exit. Quietly, carefully, but not before. One last time in a bungalow outside Luba, the sea crashing loud against the rocks. He kissed me there again like he had on the balcony in Barta. And then he said, "You will never belong to anyone again." After me, he was right. But not in the way he meant. I don't regret him, but I do resent the fact that even now, when a man brushes my cheek a certain way, I flinch, not out of fear, but memory. Because once you've been owned by someone who knew how, no one else touches you the same way again. They whispered it in the corners of embassy receptions and air-conditioned NGO boardrooms. They didn't say it out loud, not to my face, but I heard it always indirectly. "She's clever, yes. But also, well, you know, sleeping with Ngonga. She must have known what she was doing. A man like him doesn't waste time unless a woman makes herself available. She wasn't the first. She won't be the last." But the line that stayed with me the most, the one that always found a way to sting, no matter how deeply I buried it, was this one: "She let him do whatever he wanted to her. Because he was rich. Let me tell you the truth. All of it. Not the press statement version. Not the whispered version. Mine. Baltasar was not a man, he was a kingdom. Wasn't like the other men I had known, engineers, professors, well-meaning aid workers with reusable water bottles and soft hands. Baltasar moved like a man who had long since stopped asking for permission. He didn't own just assets. He owned influence. Conversations shifted when he entered a room. Heads tilted. Voices softened. Eyes followed. He had currency that couldn't be taxed: fear, respect, desire, secrets. His wealth was old and layered. Not the flash of new money, but the elegance of someone who knew exactly what a silk pocket square signified in a room full of uniforms. He owned oil fields, real estate from Barta to Abidjan, security firms, private islands, and loyalty that had been bought over generations. He was married to royalty. He had 4 passports. He didn't just control money. He controlled narratives, and when he looked at me, it wasn't transactional, it was surgical, deliberate. Like a man selecting something rare to devour slowly. Let me make something painfully clear: I didn't want his cars, or his villas, or the black cards tucked in his wallet. I didn't want his driver, his bodyguards, or the closet full of suits that probably cost more than my Berlin apartment. I wanted what his power gave me access to: freedom from irrelevance. You see, I'd always been in control. The efficient German girl who got things done. Who filled out grants, built policy bridges, drafted reports that no one read. I had built my life on clarity and moral certainty. And yet I was crushingly invisible, a woman in rooms full of men. A foreigner in countries where my presence was both coveted and questioned. A partner, never a player. A facilitator, never a decider. Then came Baltasar. He didn't ask me to serve coffee, he didn't ask me to justify my presence. He looked at me as if I was already part of the room he controlled. With him, I wasn't just a body. I was a weapon. He introduced me in rooms that weren't meant for me. He used my opinions in arguments with ministers. He took me to dinners where European oil executives tried to hide their guilt behind dessert wine, and he let me rip them apart with facts, not flirting but yes. When night came, and the doors closed behind us, I gave him everything. What he did to my body was not about money. Baltasar didn't use money to seduce me, he used power like scent, invisible, intoxicating, everywhere. And when it came to our nights, our secret hours behind locked doors and shuttered balconies, it wasn't about him taking control. It was about him revealing what I had hidden for years. He read me. Like a language I didn't even know I spoke. He learned how to touch me the way no man ever had, not because he was better in bed, but because he paid attention. He knew when to be soft, when to hold back, and when to make me beg without ever saying a word. He once said, "You speak 10 languages with your body when your mouth stays silent." He did things to me that I still dream about, and yes, I let him. Not because he was rich, but because, for the first time, I felt fully known. Even if it was only at night. Even if it came at the cost of my own dignity. He made me kneel once, not from dominance, but from reverence. I cried once, during sex, not because of pain, but because of how deeply he saw me. He whispered things in Fang, in Portuguese, in French, things I didn't always understand, but felt burned into my skin. Was it love? Maybe. Was it surrender? Absolutely. Was it transactional? Only if you believe that power is always a currency. I got access. He got my body, my loyalty, my silence. I got protection. He got worship. I moved through checkpoints faster. I got calls answered. My reports reached desks they'd never seen before. I was his shadow queen, and I walked a little taller because of it. So yes, if you want to reduce me to the stereotype of the ambitious white woman sleeping with a powerful African man to get ahead, go ahead, but you'll miss the truth entirely, because it wasn't about wealth. It was about validation. Being chosen. Being claimed. Being seen by a man who could have had anyone and still came back to me, again and again, for 4 months, even when it endangered him. I left not because I had enough. I left because I was becoming someone else. Each time I let him do what he wanted, tie me, possess me, speak to me like I was his only witness, I became less myself. Not weaker, just more tied to his myth, and I began to fear that I didn't exist without his attention. That's why I left. Not because he ran out of money. Not because the thrill was gone, but because I wanted to remember who I was before I let him own me. So, to those who ask, did you stay with him because he was rich? No, I stayed because he made me feel bigger than I was, and smaller at the same time, because he was the first man who saw me not just as capable but as dangerous, as equal, as his mirror. He was a mirror I eventually had to shatter to save myself. But some nights, even now, I still find the shards in my memory and they still cut. It was a Thursday morning, cold and wet in Berlin, the kind of rain that seeps through coats and into bones. I had just left a meeting with the Ministry of Development, where I was presenting a forest reforestation initiative in East Africa. I stopped at a cafe on Friedrichstrasse to warm up and answer emails. My phone buzzed. An alert from Le Monde Afrique. I didn't click it at first. I rarely do. But then I saw his name in bold: Baltasar Ngonga arrested in massive sexual coercion scandal involving 200+ women linked to African and European power circles. I froze. The rain outside became a blur at first. I thought it was a hoax. Or propaganda. A political takedown. He had always warned me, half smiling, that his enemies would come for him. He said, if they can't find money, they'll use women. But then I kept reading. And I kept unraveling. The piece was long. Brutal. Journalistic in tone but surgical in revelation. It claimed that for over a decade, Baltasar had seduced systematically, strategically wives, daughters, secretaries, and lovers of diplomats, generals, opposition leaders, oil tycoons, and even religious clerics. They used words like predatory seduction, state-funded bedroom diplomacy, sexual manipulation as a tool of surveillance, weaponized intimacy. The report alleged that he collected secrets not through hacking, but through pillow talk. Through bodies, through whispered confessions after sex. Some women described being psychologically addicted to him. Others said he made them feel chosen by God and forsaken by themselves. One of the women, anonymized, said when he touched you, it was like the world stopped spinning. And when he disappeared, you weren't sure if you'd ever breathe normally again. I felt my stomach turn. Because that woman could have been me, was me. I sat in that cafe for 2 hours. Coffee cold. Phone burning in my palm. I reread the article. Then I read the comments, the ugliest part of any truth. No sympathy for these women. They knew what they were doing, sleeping their way into power and crying when it backfires. How does one man seduce 200 women? They must have lined up gold diggers in business suits. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone, to shout at the world that it wasn't like that, not for me, that I loved him, that it wasn't power I wanted, it was him. The way he whispered to me in the dark, the way he paused before saying my name, the way he said, you are the only silence in a life full of noise. But suddenly, all of it felt like a rehearsal, words he had whispered before. And after, to dozens, maybe hundreds of women who also thought they were the exception. The phases of ruin. Denial. At first, I told myself it wasn't true. Or if it was, it didn't matter. My story was separate, sacred, singular. He told me things he never would have told others. He made me feel seen, not used. But memory began to betray me. I remembered the necklace he gave me. I had once thought it was custom-made. But what if it wasn't? I remembered how he would disappear for days and come back smelling like different colognes. I used to tell myself they were business meetings. Now I wondered if they were other women, other versions of me. Anger. Then came the rage, not just at him but at myself for being smart, but not smart enough. For being warned by colleagues, whispers, even my own gut, and not listening. For choosing to believe the man who moved like velvet and hid razors beneath his silk words. For giving him not just my body but my loyalty. I remembered every time I defended him. Every time I said, he's not like that. Every time I dismissed a rumor with a tired laugh and a confident, I know him. I didn't know him. I only knew the mirror he held up to me. Shame. And then came the worst part. The shame, that corrosive, silent poison that eats you from the inside. That tells you you weren't special, that you were a pawn, a fool, a name on a list. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. For weeks, I didn't touch another person. Not a handshake. Not a hug. Because every touch reminded me of his. And how it meant nothing. When the journalists called, they found me eventually. Investigative reporters, international watchdog groups, a BBC documentary producer. They had emails, pictures, check-in logs from the lodge in Bioko Island. They asked, Did you know? They asked, were you coerced? They asked, were you in love? I didn't know how to answer because how do you explain falling for a man who made a career out of seduction? How do you explain feeling chosen when you were just next? I declined every interview. Because I wasn't ready to be a headline. What hurts most? It wasn't that he slept with others, it wasn't even that he used women to gain leverage. It was that he made me believe we were a story. Not an operation, not a transaction, not a game. I gave him poems. Scars. Secrets. He gave me illusions dressed in intimacy, and the hardest part? I still miss him. Even now, even after everything, what do you do when your greatest passion becomes your deepest humiliation? You survive. You learn. You grieve the woman you were before you were used as a weapon against yourself. Some nights I still dream of him, the sound of his voice, the heat of his skin, the lies he told with tender precision. And then I wake up alone, safe, changed. And I say out loud, never again, even if part of me still hopes he meant it, just once. Even if part of me still aches for the man he pretended to be.